right, you back?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, this is so awesome. We like to talk a lot, and not to say we like to talk. We have to talk about some of the obstacles we run into operating within spaces on the right, because the right needs to understand and they need to hear from voices that have actually been behind the curtain. But we also
Mhm.
have the opportunity to use our platforms to advance solutions. So you've put together a kind of a plan for Republicans. What is that? And explain it to us, and let's kind of go through.
Yeah, so it's called the 3-Point Plan to Unite America. You can, of course, find it on Twitter, but it'd be easier to just find it on my blog, which is on Medium, and that's my full name, PamelaDeniseLong.medium.com. So 3-Point Plan, there are a couple reasons why I wrote it. One, I wrote it because folks were always asking, what is it that Black Americans want, right? Because they have these ideas that Black Americans are looking for, handout, and all of these stereotypical tropes that I won't even let cross my lips. And I also wanted to address, in the meantime, the Rick Scott's 11-point plan to save America. I read that and I spoke about it on Rising when I was on there. And there were parts of it that I could support, particularly some of the stuff around immigration, some of it. And then there were parts of it where I was like, wait, what? About the colorblindness issue in particular. And I think what is keeping the Republican Party, the right, stuck in this narrative is its own struggle, the leaders' struggle with understanding how race ties into our politics, and colorblindness ain't the answer to doing anything in America at this point. So the
Uh,
3-Point Plan, go ahead.
how race ties into how race ties
Everything.
into politics. You said you said earlier about the idea of racial equity, right? And so that like scares the crap out of white Republicans and conservatives because of how the left uses it, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not of their own critical thinking. It's not of their own understanding of what is meant by that. It's totally based on how the left uses the word equity. And so we had
Mm-hmm.
Marcel on last week, and
Oh, awesome.
he gave one of the most thorough breakdowns of like that question of equity and why it matters to
Mm-hmm.
my audience that I think that they've ever heard before. So
Awesome.
what do you mean by that kind of equity, and how do you think, or why do you think it's purposely left out of the Republican conversation? Because I have my own reasoning for why I think it's that way, but I like to hear yours.
Yeah, so I'm sure Marcel gave being a Gullah Geechee and his being an educator and his love for history gave some really excellent
Yo, he
historical context.
he
So I won't try to
smashed
regurgitate any of
he
that.
smashed that joint. Like, it was, he had me sitting up there like, okay, let me think carefully before I respond. So when someone has me like, oh, okay, let me make sure I'm on my P's and Q's, it's definitely worth being celebrated. He did that.
Fantastic. So I will simplify mine in this way. So I truly focus. There are several things. One, I do equity consulting and implementation as an organizational development consultant, right? I typically focus on racial equity there, and that looks like many things. That is really about making sure that people in the institution are experiencing the institution in as fair way as possible without their treatment being influenced by race or their other identities. And if that were to happen and they are unfairly treated and they experience negative consequences, there is a restoration process that happens there, including relationships, including changing policy practices and procedures, as well as potential punitive consequences, depending on the severity of what the victim, the person, the target experienced, right? But when I talk about equity from the political perspective, I am truly centering on Black Americans, and I'm centering on multi-generational Black Americans in particular. So I mentioned I'm a seventh generation American. I am a descendant of those people enslaved in this country for 250 years, and for the other 150 years were intentionally left out of realizing their potential being held back by policies that were both legal and outside the law, that took their wealth, that didn't get them hired, that got them fired before anyone else, that redlined the neighborhoods that they were in and had covenants that prevented them from being in others, the practices in banks with higher interest rates and steering, all the things, right? So when I talk about equity, I am literally talking about the wealth that has been taken from our people and giving that wealth, reinvesting, distributing for the first time, the wealth that had been taken and withheld from them. So that is what I talk about with equity from the political perspective, because the people who built this country, who were enslaved in it, haven't gotten their due while everyone else has been benefiting from what they built.
And you'll get the instant response from that, from most right Republicans and conservatives is, well, like that was a long time ago, and we are a meritocracy, right? Now we judge on accomplishment and merit and this and that, right? So I ask them all the time. I was like, okay, so what merit are you judging your black pundits off? Because if you're judging them off of their success, you're judging them off of, because that's what's supposed to get you lifted up in the merit system, right? Actually having some kind of success, actually being effective, actually accomplishing the goal that you set out for. That's what lifts you up when it comes to merit. So for 60 years, you've lost 90% of the black vote. So how exactly are you judging merit? If you've gotten no success, if you've gotten no buy-in, you've gotten nothing from it. If you are a meritocracy, how exactly are you judging that merit? I can never get a question.
Ideal. The meritocracy bit is an ideal, and we know it's not true.
But they use it as an absolute. They don't use it as something
absolute. It's an absolute ideal, but it's definitely not a reality. So there was data that came out of, I think it was the Wall Street Journal, but there was data that came out to look at the cost of racism and biased practices on the wealth of the United States. And over the last 20 years that they could calculate, the cost was $6 to $9 trillion.
Yeah, because and they keep trying to pay it off in the form of welfare so they can build their Marxist system instead of actually.
We're not. We don't. The reality, I'm not on welfare, but I can tell you that I have experienced significant bias in my life. So has my child. So has other people that I know who have bourgeois values, who, have, all the other things that people try to the tropes that they try to market about what Black people are and why they're not getting far ahead. They don't exemplify any of that. So we have to get away from this idea that we live in a meritocracy, that we lived in a post-racial society, because we don't. Now, we might aspire to be that, but in the meantime, there's some stuff we're going to have to do to address the ways that us not being there yet actually affects people's lives. And if the right continues to deny the reality that racism impacts people in real psychological, social, economic ways, they are going to continue to lose because it's a fantasy and an obvious lie to everybody else. And even if the Democrats aren't really interested in fixing America, repairing America, they're going to win just on the fact that you aren't either. And the way that they're talking about it is crazy. The way the right is talking about it is crazy. And
I pulled you off because I was gonna let you talk about the plan, and your conversation is so fire to me. It's like every single thing you say, I'm like, you know what? I want to ask about this. I want to ask about, you know what I'm saying? So it's kind of hard for me to be quiet and just let you speak, but I'm gonna do that because I want to hear your plan. So go ahead.
No worries. So here are the bullets of the plan. The first part of the 3-point plan is law and order, married to responsibility and accountability. And what we are asking here with this plan, and I should preface it by saying this, the plan is clarifying from the perspective of freedmen, descendants of slaves, three core things that can be done. And these are calls to action for Republicans to unfold into their talking points, into an actual policy implementation platform. So law and order married to responsibility and accountability. Everybody alive wants to be secure and safe in their neighborhoods, in their communities. There is a balance to how law and order happens. And in order for us to have trust in authority figures, and in order for the authority that they have to be leveraged in honorable ways, they have to be held to account as well. They have to exemplify the same law and order that they are demanding from citizens. So this is saying we're going to fund police, of course, and at the same time, we're going to make sure when you use the authority, the police authority that you have, when you step out of line, you are held to account unequivocally about that. There shouldn't have to be a whole bunch of marches and a whole bunch of people losing their children and husbands and wives when people are routinely, or even, so I say routine because here's why. The same as we know with criminality, that there are a few people who continue to commit crimes repeatedly. The same is shown in research about law enforcement officers who have a pattern. They have a pattern of excessive use of force. Those people need to be held to account, right? It's not all police, as they like to say, but those who are cutting up don't often enough to enforce trust, to build trust. They don't often enough get held to account. And there are plenty enough people out here making excuses for it. Law and order,
just
responsibility, accountability.
Kind of inject into that, because this is something I've been really focusing on. There is a really great series on HBO Max right now called "We Own This City." It is about the Baltimore Gun Task Force. When we talk about the police not being held accountable, I'm not even just talking about the police. I am talking about the entire system, the entire progressive system that rules those areas and how they operate. This show, We Own This City on HBO Max, it gives you a behind the scenes view of how progressivism runs law and order in these cities. If you think progressives fight against Republicans dirty, watch till you see how they police their own, the people that are in their communities. You need to watch this, and I'm telling every Republican that is law and order, understand what you are supporting if the accountability is not in the conversation. And that it is a very good way for you to see it with your own eyes when they lay out all the corruption that was inside the Baltimore Gun Task Force. So that is a good way for people to see it with their own eyes, how it manifests itself, why people have a certain view of police that they have in certain areas, and understanding that those things will have to be rectified before you can have like a law and order kind of and clean up society. But it is eye opening to how corruption is normalized within the entire system, and then only the police catch the brunt of it when it is an entire system that is failing these communities.
Yeah, I will definitely check that out. And you do name something incredibly important here is, yes, it's a municipality as a whole, and then some, right? And we're not just talking about, and this is the point, another one of my Freedman brothers has said, when we talk about law and order and responsibility and accountability, we're of course talking about domestic policing, but we're also talking about our security of our country. So there's this element about immigration control and border management and land, air, and sea, like the whole kit and caboodle, that needs to be unfolded here as well. And the other piece I'll mention about that, having trained police officers about trauma and trauma healing and trauma responsive approaches to both the way the system operates for them and how they interact with citizens, is that the system also needs to recognize the ways that the job itself, depending on where people are, because policing in a little quiet suburb of St. Louis ain't the same as policing in the heart of Chicago, right? Is that there is trauma that happens in law enforcement for officers who are doing the work that the system doesn't recognize and puts people back out there when they really do need help. And there's ways that the officer's job is jeopardized if they communicate that they need help. So that needs to be fixed as well. So we need people who are fit for duty across the board, whether it is they have the right racial attitude, the right self-management, emotional regulation attitude to de-escalate versus escalate. And when folks have experienced too much where they're traumatized and triggered easily, that needs to be addressed as well.
We're gonna be running out of time. I don't think we're gonna get to
No.
your other 2 points, but look, because
Okay.
but I think that this one is is a very good starting point. It's a very, very, very good starting point to have these conversations, because if you look at every single poll of Black Americans, 70-80% is like, no, we need the police. Like, we are not the
Yeah.
ones going out defund the police. We understand the necessity of having the police in our communities and why it is important. And
Right.
we want them there. And like you said, they go through trauma too.
Mm.
And I don't ever want to like put it out like, oh no, the police are bad. It's all, no, that's not the case. The case is when we are made to decide between the police or the public, think about all of the people we let off the hook. Like
Right.
it's not a matter of just, okay, the police must be bad, or Black Lives Matter must be good. Like, neither one of those is the definitive
False
conversation.
dichotomy.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
wrong dichotomy. It is, what do the laws look like? Are they pushing a lot of these things to pad numbers? Are they pushing these things as taxation and revenue increasers? Like,
Right.
how is that locality, that municipality actually operating? We never get to have those conversations because it is always either police bad or Black person bad. No one ever
Absolutely.
stops and says, hey, wait a minute, there's a whole government structure into this. Maybe they're the bad ones and we can focus on them for a minute. So
And
that's,
let's fix the thing and stop trying to point fingers. Let's fix the problem. I know we're running out of time, and so here's what I will say in my last moment is check out the plan on my Medium blog. Point 2 is an Americanizing education. Point 3 is all Americans first. Check them out, read them, give me your feedback. I look forward to it.
and I will post them on my social media so everybody will be able to find it as well. And
Awesome.
I'm so sorry. Like, when I get fire conversation, my mouth keeps moving, and you just came and just blew everything up today. So I appreciate you so much. We'll try to get you back on the show and definitely have more of these conversations. I am, like, you got me skied up today. So I'm so grateful that you came through.
Thanks, Sonnie. I've enjoyed it. I'd love to come back. I appreciate it.
Looking forward to it. The one and only Denise Long. We fire conversation, people. We're gonna take a short break. We will come back and close things out.